But...
Well, I thought the US played some good stuff, by their standards, really. The only team I was disappointed in was England.
Right.
And I know a draw was good for them. And spare me this Iran result, because the more you think about the Iran game, Iran were just absolutely dreadful. And you can only beat what's in front of you. But I was disappointed with England. I thought the US, by comparison, were very good. When you look at the player pool comparison, when you look at the availability of the squad depth, I thought their game plan was really, really good. I was super disappointed in England's performance. And I was baffled by the substitutions. Completely baffled by it.
Overall, Stevie, is a draw a fair result?
I think so. I don't think you could say either team really deserved to take the 3 points. You know, I think one of the keys if you're England and if you're the US is the substitution that Gareth Southgate made, bringing Henderson on from Bellingham, told you exactly what was happening in the game then.
Right.
Because there was a little spell, 5, 10, maybe even 15 minutes, where I'm sitting thinking the US could score here, and they actually deserved it on that spell. And if it wasn't for the guy who everybody said shouldn't have been there, Harry Maguire, just getting a header at the back post on Zimmerman, this could have been a defeat. So the US made England play the way they did. They made Southgate change the way they were playing, bringing Henderson on and having to take off a guy in Bellingham who going forward is absolutely, that's his game. So, yeah, for the US, there's tons of positives. For England, I mean, they kept a clean sheet, but that's about it.
Well, let's focus on the US, shall we first? Seb, you must be happy. You happy? You ever happy?
Great result, and I think beyond that, guys, we got to say, like a great performance. This wasn't the U.S. clinging to the crossbar, desperately defending. Yeah, there was maybe a stretch last 5 minutes of the game where England had some quality chances there, but I think the U.S., all 11 players really had a performance that for the most part they could be proud of, and I think we got to give the manager, Greg Berhalter, some credit here. Some of this is hindsight is 2020, it's how the game plays out, but he took a big risk with his lineup, right? He didn't make any changes to the team that we saw against Wales, with the exception of Haji Wright up top, and he started 3 guys who were on yellow cards. None of those guys got a yellow card, so they'll all be available for the game against Iran. He put clearly what he believes was his best 10 outside of the striker position, and the team responded. It was by far the best we've seen them in a long time, and I think what's really impressive is just how much better they looked against England than they did against Wales. So a really great performance, a really great result. I think if there's any frustration here, it's that the U.S. had some quality chances, especially that really one great opportunity from Weston McKennie. You know, he doesn't even make Pickford work. He puts it well over the bar. But other than that, a great day for the U.S. If anything it does highlight, it's just how big those points that were left on the table against Wales were. Because if you had 4 points right now, you'd really be sitting pretty hidden into the third game.
Maka, were you surprised how good the US were compared to that second half they put in against Wales?
Yes, I listened to all the boys. I agree with a lot of the points. They looked tired against Wales, didn't they? But I was really impressed by their energy today. They look quicker than England. They look sharper than England. They look, you know, Serginho Dest, even Weston McKennie. They look really sharp, driving forward a lot. You know, I was very disappointed in England yet again. But you know, I've sat there with yourselves 2 years ago, 4 years ago, and said the same thing. You know, just because they beat Iran and Iran were woeful, as Craig said in the first game, you can't get carried away by England's performances. They do enough. They're strong at the back. They keep clean sheets, and they progress through these competitions. So I didn't really expect, you know, a huge performance from them today because, of course, I watched them in the Nations League games in the summer. Yes, they beat Iran, but actually the form going into this tournament hasn't been great as a whole. So it's a slow burner for England. I wasn't expecting much, and you know, I got what I thought I'd get, to be honest.
You had one manager that just sent the team out the same as, and you had the other one who was thinking outside the box a little bit.
Right.
Greg Berhalter. So I need to do something a little bit different. I can't just sort of go toe-to-toe the way we were. So I'll put 2 through the middle, and I'll just try and, you know, make sure the 2 centre-backs are passing sideways, try and deny the ball into Declan Rice early on. And you saw they were trying to play that early ball out to the full-backs, but they had pressure there because they had Pulisic and McKennie. And once again, Tyler Adams...
He was superb.
Yeah, he was. McKennie was when he... Don't forget McKennie's been injured at Juventus, and so he's not fully fit. So as well as that yellow card to worry about, he's got some match fitness issues. And look, you look at where England are taking their players from, all the elite clubs basically, and then you look at Tim Reamy's in his mid-30s, playing for Fulham. Tyler Adams and Aronson, who come on as a good player, they're fighting in a relegation scrap with Leeds. They're not getting plucked from Manchester City and Liverpool, in general terms. And so what they did, and I never quite got this mentality before the game, that a lot of the US fraternity, soccer fraternity, seem to buy into this. Oh, it's just about the Iran game now. And I'm sitting thinking, listen, if you can somehow pull a win off against England, then all you need is a draw. It's not like bin this one and then we'll beat Iran. It doesn't work like that. And so I thought that was a little weird, but clearly the players weren't thinking that way. And a little bit more care and attention in the final third, and they could have won the game. I just thought I thought Berhalter got what he needed to do right, and I thought Gareth Southgate, and it's not the first time, and we saw it in the Croatia game in the World Cup 4 years ago, where things were going wrong, and he wasn't able to put it right. I think we kind of saw that a little bit again today, and he can be thankful, in my opinion, that in this group they've had Iran, and now they're going to get Wales, who are poor.
I just want to bring in Nedum to the conversation as well. Nedum, who impressed you from a US perspective today?
To be honest, I think it has to be Tyler Adams. I thought he was sweeping up really, really well at times when England could maybe hit USA on a transition. He seemed to come across really well. And, to be honest, I've listened to what everybody's saying, and it seems like it's the easiest thing in the world to just be down on England. But there were positives because some of those guys at the back did play well. I think this matchup that the USA had for them, I thought it was pretty good. And, I could hear someone laugh in the background. But, we talked about them having a two up front. But the way that I saw it, there were two lines of three, and England couldn't play through the middle. So I think that substitution when Jordan Henderson came on was to have two pivots in there, which would give them a different look. Because before that, the USA were doing so well to funnel England out wide. And I think they'd got that really, really spot on. And I think when they did bring on Henderson, they had a different level of sort of like control within the game. It was still one of those matches where ultimately you think, USA played really well, England weren't at their best. But then England are also in a conversation now where in the last game of the group, they need to lose by 4 to essentially be out of it. This is part of the process for them. And, as Craig said, the game against Croatia, he came up wanting. But we're talking about a World Cup semi-final. I think we're talking about in the last tournament where they were in the final. So even though it doesn't suit everybody's eye and we still have a sense of disappointment about it, this is an England side which is more successful than any we've seen in our lifetimes. And again, today, you could see the fact that they weren't at their best, but they still managed to force some sort of result out because it wasn't that long ago when they're losing to the likes of Iceland and so on and so forth. And it's not to say defend them and say they were great, because they weren't. But the fact is they managed to get something out of a game where, on a different day they haven't, because we've seen that throughout the summer in the Nations League.
Nedum, how can someone who's been sharing a room with Seb for the last week be so positive on life, considering what we saw? It was the sideway, it was the lethargy, it was the passive attitude from England that was certainly frustrating. I've got my punter out on 100%, Nedum, but from that perspective, you thought, right, you've got the momentum after that victory against Iran. Now just go for it. And it was just so slow and horizontal and boring.
But is that Gareth Southgate's fault, though? Because as you look at that second game, he's played the same team that he played in the first, which he was praised for. So ultimately, I guess the matchup was different, and the ways in which they tried to play in that first game weren't available to him in the second, which is why you give credit, in my opinion, to the USA side and Berhalter and the way that they set up. They were very, very good tactically, I thought. I think Craig said that at the start, and you could see that if you had the ball at the back for England, you're seeing two lines of American shirts. So you're thinking you've got to go out wide, got to do this. But then they were being met. I thought Anthony Robertson played well. Serginho Dest played really well. So some of those players were at the peak of their powers. In England, they weren't there. I think after they made a couple of changes, perhaps got a little bit better. But at some point within a game, especially if the clock keeps ticking, from the outside, we want to see them go for it. But for them, they're playing tournament football. And they know that if they overdo it, then ultimately they might end up being in a worse position going into that last game. And, come the end of the match, I think USA take the draw. And England will take the draw because they did suffer, but the fact is they're still en route to the place where they want to be, which is to have a chance of winning the whole thing in the final.
Well, you can't argue with your last statement, Nedum. Ultimately, they're in a good position, yes. They're going to go through, yes. But you have to look at it from a point of view of, we've played against a team who, on paper, man for man, are nowhere close to us, but yeah, in stages in this game, it was backs against the wall. And you can say, well, you can look at the defence and say they defended well. The truth is, this US side struggles to score goals. They don't know who the centre forward is. So a team that doesn't really have a centre forward that scores goals is causing you so many headaches, streaming through the middle of the park. I mean, there are so many questions. You can look at it from the point of view of, yes, they're sat in a good spot, but going forward, you know, what does Sterling do? What does Saka do when they're not at their best? Because I don't remember them doing anything today. Yeah. You know, Rice, who normally is a guy in the middle of the park who's just controlling everything, picking everything up, wasn't in the game. Mason Mount wasn't in the game.
Bellingham wasn't in the game.
I'm kind of going to let Bellingham off a little bit because he's at his best making late runs in the box. So I think I'll let him off of that. But you have to think about that going forward. Gareth Southgate can't just go, well, we're in a good position, because they were that bad today.
England are in this position because of the group, right? It's another particularly easy group, notwithstanding the US, right, who have played 3 really good halves. There's an argument to say that the Welsh in the second half asked more questions of the US than England did today.
Definitely.
Right? And then you've got to look at when England progress in this competition, and they will, whatever happens when they get to the last 16, I don't know, is it going to be the same old with the teachers' pets? With the Raheem Sterlings, with the Mason Mounts, and all that sort of thing. And what world are we living in that Phil Foden is not even in the picture? Phil Foden is there's only 2 players going in the Man City team before Phil Foden. That's Kevin De Bruyne and Erling Haaland. You look at likes of Spain, they nourish the likes of Pedri. You look at these countries that build their whole thing around these super talented, mercurial individuals. And we have arguably the best, one of the best, they've got plenty of good players, but certainly one of the most talented. He doesn't even get near the field.
Inevitably, Phil Foden was a big subject of the interviews that Gareth Southgate did after the game. Here is his response to not bring him on at all during the match. Of course, some certainly surprised when it was Henderson that came on. Well, we thought it was the right thing to keep the team from the start, and then the wide players. We went with Jack and Marcus ahead of Phil on the changes. We thought Jack would keep the ball for us and take up the pitch, and we thought Marcus's speed would also be a threat going into the last part of the game. Does that make sense to you, Macca?
It makes sense. I don't agree with it. I'm like Craig. You know, Phil Foden has arguably had his best year ever up until now. The goals he scores already for Manchester City. The fact that he can't even get on the pitch when we're, you know, let's be honest, we need to be more positive. I've always said England needs to be creative. I'm fine with them at the back. I don't think they're going to concede goals. I didn't last year in the last tournament. I didn't in the tournament before, because they don't push forward enough. Luke Shaw gets forward. Kieran Trippier doesn't get forward enough for me, because I want my teams to be more creative. I really do. You know, I've got no problem. I think Kieran Trippier is a great defender. But today, when you want to score goals and when you want to see the team do something different, you know, that's when I want, you know, a Trent Alexander-Arnold on. I'm not concerned defensively with England when they're playing Wales, Iran, or the USA, with all respect. I want to see my team create. I want to see my team do something special and show something on the eye that they're good enough. Our best players are creative players. And, you know, arguably the best one, Phil Foden, hasn't been seen. You know, so I agree. You know, of course, what Gareth says goes, because the top of the group, and England's always seemed to muddle through. We had it in the Euros when they got to the final. You know, the games against Croatia and Scotland, and you know, sometimes you get a bit of a damn squib of a game, but they get through and they keep on going. But I said it. I'm still having the same conversations as I did 2 years, 4 years ago. They still need to improve a lot to get to the final and win it. You know, the Denmark game when we won, we still didn't do really enough, you know, to think we're going to go and win. We're going to be, you know, we're one of the best teams. And that's my only concern at the moment. Defensively, I always think we're going to be fine. But it's whether we can beat teams and beat them comfortably and really look good on the eye. And that's my only concern at the moment. It's frustrating because I want to see them play a lot better than they are showing, because the talent they have is undoubtedly there. It's just for some reason the shackles seem to be on when they're in an England shirt, and everything becomes a lot safer. Everything becomes a lot more horizontal. Everything's sideways because we don't want to lose the ball and we don't want to get the roar from the crowd of disappointment. And that's the only thing for me at the moment.
Let's remind you what happened earlier today. Wales in action against Iran. This had 0-0 pretty much written all over it for much of the tie. Wayne Hennessy, though, sent off late on in the game, and that would then open the door for Iran to score two very late goals indeed in the 98th and 101st minute, quick maths there, would see Iran take all 3 points. Who saw this? Did anyone?
Yeah.
Go on.
Well, enough.
All right.
This was thoroughly deserved. I mean, they deserved it. Iran, there's no doubt about it. They played the better football. They a goal rolled offside in the first half. They crashed it against the post a couple of times. Yeah. I mean, Wales were terrible. I mean, they were as bad as they were in the first half against the United States. They couldn't keep the ball. And as I say, they had 2 passengers. 2 passengers. Ramsey's gone, right, and Bale's gone. I mean, maybe Bale scored a penalty. You know, he won the penalty in the first game. Maybe the ball will drop to him and he puts it in the top corner. These little moments might happen, but if they don't, they're screwed.
Right.
And you can throw Ramsey in that pie as well. And so, do I expect anything from Wales against England? No, because they're absolutely average. And Iran thoroughly deserved to get their win. And I think it'll be a test against the US. Yep. I think the US will dominate the game. But Iran are a threat. They're a threat. Unlike the game against England when they had a super bad day at the office. They can't afford to have that, but yeah, Wales have no complaints, and Rob Page said that.
Yeah, Nathan, were you surprised the response from Iran considering what happened against England?
Not necessarily, no. I think quite a few people had said that they are a good side and it was meant to be a tough game for England in that opener. So then to see it go 6-2, as Craig said there, you know, they did have an uncharacteristically bad day for them. But then in this game against Wales, it was really interesting because the stat that you see with that Welsh team, which you tend not to see normally, is possession at 62%. And as you can see from the way that game went, it didn't suit their style of play. It didn't suit them at all to almost be the protagonist within it. And I think for Iran, they had tons of opportunities off the back of counters, you know, pressing at the key moments. And, you know, it felt like they definitely deserved to score more goals in there. And the red card, you know, maybe that is the biggest difference. But the fact is, you did feel like they deserved more from it. So I think Wales, it's crazy to think that this is how badly they've played in that first half against the USA and basically in the entirety of this game, because we're used to seeing them at least go down with a fight, and that's kind of what we saw in the second half against US. But in this game today against Iran, I thought they were exceptionally poor, and now they go to this England game now knowing that, is it 4 goals, a 4-goal win that they need to get? It's not really something which I kind of see in their DNA, and I think I'm kind of with Craig when you say ultimately at the moment they feel very, very average, and if they play anything like they did today against England, I think they could have been in a lot of trouble.
So just a reminder how things look going into the final round of matches. It's all about that clash between Iran and the US. The US have to win to advance to the knockout stages. 4 games on Saturday, without a doubt the biggest one sees Argentina take on Mexico. Lionel Messi's side looking to bounce back, of course, after that opening round defeat against Saudi Arabia. If you want to hear more on that game, be sure to check out the latest edition of our podcast, where former Argentinian international Mr. Pablo Zabaleta helps us look ahead to that clash. Elsewhere on Friday, we saw the Dutch draw against Ecuador by 1 goal each. It was interesting because Gakpo opened the scoring. Brilliant goal from him early on to give the Dutch the advantage, but then they just offered so little. Ecuador was superb. Unlucky, really, overall, not to take all 3 points. It's just 1 point in the end, which means for them, it's all to play for in that clash against Senegal. They avoid defeat in that tie, then they advance. The Dutch, meanwhile, just have to avoid defeat against Qatar, who are out after losing 3-1 against Senegal. You look at this Dutch side, boys, and I suppose sometimes we can be fooled by the name and because of what's gone on in the past, the quality that they've had in the past. But there was just nothing much to get excited about, apart from Gakpo today. Yeah, I mean, they come into this tournament and one of their big problems is they just don't have the goal scorers of yesteryear, those huge names, those footballers that are playing in the top teams around the world, like the Hullets and the Van Bastens and Van Nistelrooy. They just don't have it.
Bergkamps, the list goes on.
I mean,
right?
They got Big Weghorst who's coming off the bench, who went to Burnley, didn't do particularly well, is now left there. Obviously Memphis Depay, he's the kind of talisman for them up front, but he's just not played this year and he's been injured. So that's kind of the problematic, well, that's one of the big problem areas, and they're not super strong in the middle of the park anymore either.
And from an Ecuador perspective, you kind of expect them to get it done against Senegal, given what we've seen from the opening 2 matches.
Yeah, exactly. And if you're playing against them, you should be wary. You know, they're physical, they're strong, they're quick, they're fast, and they're a handful. I mean, the Dutch. The surprising thing about the Dutch in this game for me, though, was how they couldn't handle that. You would have thought, with the experience they have,
yeah.
But the Dutch were way
and
off
the
it.
normal
as you
technical
said,
ability of the Dutch too, and it wasn't impressive.
No, it's going to be interesting. The final round of matches there tomorrow is all about Argentina against Mexico.